morning, friends. Namaste. Welcome to the next episode of Pilot Talks, Pilot Ki Baat. In this episode, we'll be resuming from where we left. We'll be speaking to the current president at the Nautical Institute. Yes, she is Jillian Carson Jackson. She has over 30 years of experience in the maritime industry. She is the managing director at JCJ Consulting. She is an experienced maritime technical advisor as well. Also an IALA expert for VTS, which is very close to her heart, aid to navigation and e-navigation. She has a great passion for diversity and inclusion, including empowering women in the maritime industry. So let's not wait. Let's get her on board and we'll resume our discussion and learn more about VTS and many other important topics.
A very warm good morning to Jillian and Captain Gajanan. Thank you so much for joining in again.
Yeah, thank you, Jillian. Thank you very much. And we are back to the show again. And your answers were so elaborated, and also it has created few more questions in our mind, with respect to the other aspects of port operations and VTS, VTMS being a very important, part of safety and navigation and the port operations. So we thought of inviting you again. So thank you, viewers. We have again Jillian Carson Jackson, who is, apart from the elaborated kind of a biodata of her, she's also a very gem of a person, very great supporter of AIMPA, and also the president of Nautical Institute, apart from her, port operations accolades and top-notch, I always call us top-notch VTMS trainer, so thank you very much. Thank you for joining again. And viewers are all delighted to hear you again on a few more things. So the first question for me, Vijay, is it okay?
Yeah, that's great to see you. It's great to be back again. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
So you touched a little bit about the advent of technology today, and technology, the way it is developing in port is like no one's business, because it is what is required for the efficiency of the port. And communication stands at the center point of all the efficiency, because the efficient communication can bring in a lot of efficiency. Inefficient communication, as you last time very, very precisely mentioned about the clear, concise, and unambiguous communication methodologies. So that is going to really. But tell me one thing, with this, mass and the technology together, how is it going to, work? Because I heard that Maritime port is already under the construction of accepting and trials of the automated ships, unmanned ships. So how this is going to work, with those kind of a bigger role to play for VTMS or VTS.
And thank you for fixing that and saying VTS, because Vessel Traffic Services, as we heard last time, is the actual term to use. If it's not VTS, then it's something else, and it could be a local port service. But the development of the maritime autonomous surface ship, all of the work around this, and we do have to remember that autonomous does not equal uncrewed. It does not mean that there's nobody actually on the vessel. So there's different aspects of developing with this concept of autonomy and autonomous vessels. But we do know that this advent of MaaS, as they call them, is having already a profound impact on the maritime sector. And we're seeing a lot of work in that area. In the Nautical Institute, we've actually set up a working group to deal with autonomy and technology. It's an advisory group. Within the IALA framework, they've set up a MaaS task group, actually, that's focusing on the implication for VTS and the provision of aids to navigation from the concept of development of MaaS. For VTS specifically, it's going to have an impact, I think, on this concept of our close coordination or cooperation between VTS and the participating ships. So we already know that not all vessels in a VTS participate in the VTS. Usually there's a size range of vessels that will participate. But it's a very close working relationship. The part of that team, I started talking about that. It's like a port resource management team. I might go into that a little bit more. But we are an extension of the bridge team, VTS is. In this concept of MaaS, where's that going to happen? So if that vessel has people on board, then it's going to be very similar, I think, to what we have, a digital data exchange. There may be less voice communications and more digital communications. We already started seeing that as AIS got developing, and we are now working on more digital communication exchange opportunities. Application-specific messages already exist to send data back and forth. But what about if it's a remote control vessel? So there's actually a remote operations center for the mast vessel somewhere, and it's going into a port. That means you might still have communication with a person, but that person's not physically on the ship. So how are they communicating with the VTS? Is that going to change the style of communication? In a VTS right now, we work on simplex frequencies, which means you both transmit and receive on the same frequency. So everyone hears both sides of the communication. And that was a conscious effort within VTS to move away from duplex to simplex. And that's so that everybody in the area can hear what's happening. So they have that awareness, that situational awareness, that situational awareness. Now, if there's a remote operator on the shore communicating with VTS, they may not be using that VTS. They might be in another country. They might be using a digital communications. So that means that communication between the VTS and that remote operator could still be happening, but it won't be as evident to everybody else on that frequency. You don't have that open communication frequency. So I think that's one of the key differences we've got to look at, is that communication, how we discuss, how we interact. The information exchange process is going to change. Looking to the future, I don't have a lot of answers yet. We're starting to ask the questions, which are really, sometimes it's most important to ask the right question. And I think one of my favorite sayings is, there's a time in the life of every problem where it's big enough to see, yet small enough to solve. So if we can grab hold of this issue now, while we can still be identifying the solution and ask the right questions, I think we'll be going on the right way. So some of the questions I think we need to ask are, how will VTS receive, assimilate, and process data information from autonomous vessels? And then how will this information be exchanged in an environment where you have more traditional vessels, small craft fishing vessels, and different levels of autonomous vessel working together? So that's one big question. How does VTS interact with the entity that's in control of that vessel? So that the entity at the remote operations center or some aspect. How will VTS then go about this, providing relevant and timely information to support onboard decision-making, monitoring the reactions of that vessel, and organizing the vessel traffic? How are they going to go about doing that with a mix of conventional and mass vessels? And where does this concept of clear and unambiguous, consistent terminology using SMCP and those message markers, how will that work within this environment where we have now digital data exchange as well as voice data? So it's a really interesting question about how that works, because the message markers, I think, are key. I really can't stress that enough. If you can use your message markers, both on the ship and on the shore. So pilots, please all use your message markers: question, answer, information, warning. And that just makes everything so much clearer. It means that everyone is able to use that standard marine communication phraseology and have that understanding. So how are we going to do that when we have now a mixture of digital data exchange as well as the more traditional voice? And the voice might be over a digital frequency, but it's going to be, like we are now, we're talking, but we're on a digital frequency. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that happens. And I guess there's a couple of questions. There's a couple more that will come out, but if we can answer some of those first ones to begin with, I think that'll be a good start. The impact of mass, I think, will be on the entire maritime environment significant, and goes beyond the maritime environment as well. We already are seeing this concept of autonomous cars, autonomous trucks, autonomous trains. So it really is something that we need to work with and think about, thinking about the Internet of Things, machine learning, and the use of our decision support tools. So let's hope that problem is big enough to see right now, but yet still small enough to solve.
Excellent. I mean, there is really, I always come to, when discussions of this sort happens, I think of one thing, that I'm in a very interesting times, and we all are, in fact, and we're going to see how the things develop, in near future. And that near future is going to be really near with the speed of technology today. I mean, nobody thought, 5 years back about the drone technology, but now today drones are delivering fuel to the stranded cars and medical aid to the people who are stranded. So it's going to be very speedy kind of a technology, and we are in interesting times to see how this develops in the world. Vijay, I would give you the floor to ask the next question to Jillian.
Thank you, Captain. Since you mentioned that I am an aspiring pilot, and yes, I'm looking for opportunities in India as well as abroad. So one question for the young port operators who wants to pursue their career into the VTS. So what are your thoughts on for the young port operators and for the newer ports which are coming up slowly for the effective implementation of VTS?
Oh, the effective implementation of VTS covers a number of very broad areas. You've got the ability to have that interaction with the vessel. So you need to have that communications capability. You need to have the sensor inputs to be able to maintain the traffic image. And of course, you need to have the training and qualifications of the personnel. I think maybe I'll focus on the training and qualifications of the personnel, because we've already touched on the sensors and the data and data exchange. So, and to set the scene, to talk a little bit about the trainees or the qualifications and the skill sets for the VTS operators, I actually want to go back in time. I did this at the last one as well, so I hope you don't mind if I go back in time a little bit. To set the scene, I'd like to actually take you back to when I was a VTS operator. So I went back to when I was on the ship, but now I've now become a VTS operator. I was trained for my role in the Canadian Coast Guard in Canada as what they called a marine traffic regulator. And at that time, that was a terminology that was in the Canada Shipping Act. So I think when you're thinking about setting the framework for the VTS, you have to think of the legal framework for VTS. So it needs to have a hook and law. SOLAS Convention is where you get VTS from. That SOLAS Convention is brought into law in some manner in your country with some act. And in Canada, it was the Canada Shipping Act. In Australia, it's the Navigation Act. So every country will have some act that brings that into law. So by the fact that VTS is in the SOLAS Convention and the SOLAS Convention is brought into law, you need to have that hook into where VTS is. So I was trained as a marine traffic regulator. The training was consistent across all of Canada. It was run by the Canadian Coast Guard. And I had, yes, existing maritime qualifications, but not all VTS operators, not all MTRs at the time had to have that. So it was not a requirement to take the training. But I had to have that training because I had to have a certain skill set to be a VTS operator. So then one day I was on watch, talking to some of the other people on my watch, and one of them had just returned from the Netherlands. He'd gone on a trip into the Netherlands. He visited the Hook of Holland VTS. And it's really interesting. I highly recommend that you talk to some of the VTS and the pilots in the Netherlands about their role in VTS. But anyway, so he stood in the middle of the VTS center, closed his eyes, and he said he felt he could be back at Fundy Traffic VTS, which is where we were in the Bay of Fundy in New Brunswick. That sort of planted a little seed of an idea about this concept of internationally accepted and consistent VTS training. It took a few years for that seed to germinate before I put that idea before IALA, and it was at the IALA VTS Symposium in, funnily enough, Rotterdam, in 1996, that I sort of set the challenge to IALA and said, listen, let's develop consistent international VTS training. So we started doing this back in 1996. I had the honor and pleasure to represent Canada in that work. And we developed something that was called and has been known now as the V103, which was a recommendation on the training and certification of VTS personnel. And then to support that, there's a bunch of model courses. So the training that we did, because I was in Canada, and we actually, at many places around the world, we're also realizing they don't have a big pool of ex-seafarers to do this role. And the skill set of the VTS operator, similar to the skill set of an air traffic controller, it's not the same as the skill set as a master mariner or as a, we all have our own role to play. We have our own skill sets. So we worked on the outcome level. We said, to be a VTS operator, you must have to do this, 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 and this. We didn't worry about the input level. And that meant that in Canada, I've trained VTS students right from high school, ab initio level students. I've also trained master mariners. I've also trained all levels of navigational maritime experience. I've trained 911 operators. I've trained police dispatchers. So people who come into VTS can come from many different areas, but we all have the same output level because you have the same skill set you need to meet. So those skill sets mean that we can adapt the training to reflect the input level. So we can do prior learning, assessment, and recognition for those people coming in to be VTS operators. But at the end, everyone has the same skill set, which is the most critical to make sure that we can do that skill set. You know, for example, a mariner coming in, we have a module 4, which is all about nautical knowledge. Well, we can give them credit for that. And we just do prior learning assessment and recognition, and they write a test and they show us their certificates and we know that they can do that. But then we focus on things like water space management and the other skill sets you have. So for VTS, and if you go back to your question, Vijay, some of the skill sets that you need to be a VTS operator are very specific to that role, that spatial and situational awareness with multiple bodies moving at different speeds and different times. The ability to effectively combine the auditory and the visual aspects of that in your spatial awareness. We spoke about it, strong communication skills, clear, concise communicating, maritime English. And in English, in VTS, actually, the requirement is an IALTS band level 5 or above. So the band level 5 is the minimum, and that's not that difficult, but it's that level. And then you use SMCP on top of that. This ability to quickly assess the situation, to take all that information in, to assess the situation, to develop a plan of response, and then prioritize that action depending on all of the other aspects that are happening in your waterway. So situational awareness is that concept where you perceive something and you make sense of it, you develop a response and you act on that, but you're doing it multiple things at a time, which means you're basically, I hate the term multitasking, but you're able to take in multiple aspects and do multiple things at a time. Then, of course, we're working under times of extreme pressure and also times that might be fairly quiet. So you've got those two extremes that you have to be aware of and be able to work under. Strong teamwork skills, good leadership, and good followership skill sets. And of course, it's a shift work environment, so it's not suited to everybody. But those are sort of the key areas. IALA has actually put together a very good guideline. We've recently revamped all that work from the 1990s, and we've come out with the new recommendation RO103, which is sort of based on that V103. And a new guideline, the guideline 1156. And that guideline and that recommendation were both just issued in December of 2020. And it provides a lot of information around the training. Now I'm going to put a little bit of plug in for the training I did. So I specifically carry out training for VTS operators, VTS supervisors, VTS on-the-job training instructors, and also that VTS recurrent training, that concept like in STCW to keep your skill set fresh. You do that every 3 to 5 years. So those are the main areas. I also do some generic VTS, not just VTS training, some generic training for train-the-trainer programs. And I wrote a book with the Nautical Institute. It's called the Simulation Instructor's Handbook. And based on that, I do training generically for anyone who uses a simulator in training. I do the simulator instructor training. There is another aspect of training in VTS I didn't mention. I don't know if any of your listeners would have realized, but one of the key elements that you have is that on-the-job training. So I train an on-the-job training instructor, but every VTS person, when they go to a port, every port's slightly different. You have a lot of similarities, but there's always those nuances. There's the local knowledge, the equipment you've got there, the procedures you have. So that is really important to get that trained in a very effective on-the-job training program. And to be a VTS operator, you need to have both a certificate for the B1031, the VTS operator, plus the on-the-job training. They go together. So that's not appropriate for just anyone to do. It has to be someone who's familiar with the port. I've helped some ports develop their on-the-job training programs, but it's much more important. That's why I train the on-the-job training instructors, because they're the ones who are going to deliver it. And I guess one last little plug for the Australian Maritime College Search, which is part of the University of Tasmania. I do training for them. You can check their website. And there is space on the upcoming VTS on-the-job training instructor course, which starts at the end of September. So there you go.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you so-
I mean, great. Yeah, Vijay.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for talking about the IALA guidelines and the skill sets. I'll not speak all, but some of the important skills that you mentioned was about the communication skills. The IELTS level 5 is the minimum requirement, and the ability to work under extreme pressure, and on the job training, which is necessary almost in every field. So thank you so much for elaborating on that. Captain Gajanan, sir, over to you.
Yeah, not to miss the situational awareness, which is the crux of the whole thing, because I mean, VTMS job is only seen, at least, the VTMS operators I know. I mean, they could be little old people now, but whom I have met, they will think of like only communicators. Like you have one vessel coming onto the port side and it is nearing. Please be careful. Hello, vessel XYZ, why are you going to that anchorage? That anchorage is banned. Go to the other anchorage. That's it. I mean, this kind of ambiguous, absolutely, ambiguous communication, which don't know, not identified, not clarified, not even concise. It's like, complete ranting of the thing. So with that, when the VTMS operator or VTS operator requires to have a entire waterways as a bird's eye view. And not only that, he has to see the potential situations developing, and not in next, say, half an hour or 45 minutes, in next 5 minutes, next 10 minutes, 50, and that's dynamic. It's like, it's happening every time. So it's like, like the shipmaster watching one radar, one ship, and, say 12 nautical mile range. The entire VTMS watches the, from oil pollution to safety of navigation, to dangerous craft, unidentified craft, to people, who are drifting, dragging anchors, whatever it is, call it. Any and every movement. So that is a huge kind of job, and instructor of this kind. That's why we say we call a top-notch VTMS instructor, and that's something very nice. So just to ask you really last question on this show, Jillian. I mean, you touched upon these things which are very pertinent to also our training of a pilot, and you did mention about training of pilots as well. So what do you think for a VTMS operator? I mean, you briefly mentioned about the qualities that you must have, about the situation awareness and analyzing situation, understanding the complete, having the grip of the situation. But when we do the pilot training in India, we do have certain hours to be spent in VTMS and VTS. Because one of the VTS agendas in India is also national security, because we've had the unfortunate incident of attack from the sea. So that has also become one of the top, grilling tasks for this force, which not only watches the traffic, but also watches the unidentified crafts and things like that. So how would a pilot, having a maritime domain knowledge about ship's movement, can become a very good VTMS operator? Are we looking at that?
There's a couple of points within there, actually. They're both it's really interesting, that concept. So the link between the pilot and the VTS is really critical. And the fact that VTS, I'm really, really pleased that your pilots are getting trained in what VTS does, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the whole concept of knowledge, that knowledge sharing, we know, and we have confidence in both sides of that team, because it is a team. But also the role of the pilot in VTS, and in some ports there are some very specific roles for pilots within VTS. I did note earlier that VTS is part of this port team. It's an extension really of that bridge team, and like all teams, all members of the team need to have that knowledge of, and yes, a confidence in the roles and skills of the other team members. This aspect of psychological safety, challenge and response, and the skills that we learn in BRM are all part of this concept that I like to call PRM, or Port Resource Management. Psychological safety, the challenge and response, and the skills that we learn in BRM are all part of what I like to call Port Resource Management, or PRM, where all pilots in VTS and masters work together to have that same safe outcome. But they can only do that if they understand each other's roles. The VTS training spends a significant amount of time ensuring that the VTS is aware of the role of the pilot and the ship. So if you are a mariner already, then that's fine, but we also still build on that so that the VTS link into that port side is really clear. What I'm seeing more and more of, which I really applaud that you're doing in India as well, is when pilots and VTS train together, because they can gain that enhanced level of knowledge, the respect for each other's unique skill sets that they don't get otherwise. There's ways that you can include procedures for operations, so you can actually share your knowledge and ideas about communication procedures. Which message markers do I use for that? What term do I use for this? Does it fit within the SMCP? Is it something the master will also understand? Because we have to consider the communications that are happening, everyone's trying to listen to. It can also look at this idea of specific maneuvers. For example, it could be possible, because VTS is that information-rich environment with all that data coming in, that they could do close track monitoring of a vessel that's undertaking a continuous radius turn and identify if it starts drifting off that radius. They could have terminology that they use. They could also monitor a vessel that is a deeper draft vessel that's going down through a channel with a very limited range of scope for going off either to port or starboard, and they could have a confirmation of how do they monitor and do that on behalf to support the pilot, to provide that support. Using the developments in now the dynamic approach to under-keel clearance management systems. So the marginal ships where you're looking at having less and less water under your keel, the VTS can be monitoring that and providing some support from the VTS side. So I think to have that training from both the pilot and the VTS are really helpful. Beyond the specific role of the pilot-VTS relationship, which I think I've covered a lot, is the better awareness by all of ship's officers about the role of VTS. And this is really, I think, a broader scheme of things. So as you bring in a new pilot, and yourself, Vijay, as you're doing your training as a pilot, you have gone through the SDCW training regime. In the Manila Convention, in those changes after the Manila Convention, there were amendments made specifically to include VTS as a knowledge element that was taught to masters and mates, because up until then it wasn't. And again, if you don't know the skill set of the other person, you don't necessarily have the confidence, or you aren't even aware of what they're going to be able to do. So it comes back down to knowing what VTS and what it can do. So right now then, after the Manila Convention, the training of masters and mates must include relevant and realistic training on VTS, what it is, how it works, what the skill sets of the VTS operator are, what the technologies they have available to them. To support the IALA has drafted some guidance to those maritime training centers on what that training could look like. And that's in guideline 1149. And it's actually titled Training for VTS Training for Deck Officers. Pretty straightforward. The development of that training, of that guideline, actually had input from the IMO. It had training from pilots, from masters, from mates, VTS operators, educational experts, and more. So it's really a very robust tool that's available to us. The role of I used to call it the pilot master VTS triangle. It's like they're all together, and if any one of them isn't working right, then your triangle collapses, a bit like that fire triangle. But there's a lot that's happening within this realm of ensuring that we have that team approach. Bridge resource management was a very great breakthrough. Bridge team management that we have. The port, going beyond the bridge and looking at your resources available to you. There is so much available to help support safe and efficient transits, but only if you understand what's there and how you can make it use, how you can work with it. I think having that confidence and understanding of each team member's unique skill sets and their role within that transit is going to help consistently improve safety outcomes and safe navigation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jillian. It was very nice to hear that and that kind of narration. You know, I think we are almost end of the show, but just to ask you a last question, I would let Vijay ask you a last question, and because he's also a well-wisher of AIMPA, on the committee of AIMPA, and you also are involved in so many organizations all over the world, including the president of Nautical Institute. You know, Vijay, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity for this last question. I have been associated with AIMPA since January, and it was really one of my lucky days since I came across Captain Gajanan, and he has been a mentor to me since then. And being a non-pilot and working for the pilots for the safety and security, it's really an honor and privilege. So you are also one of the advisors of AIMPA. I was one of the viewers who had watched you live attending the AIMPA website inauguration. So what are your thoughts for the way forward for this beautiful association that we have, AIMPA?
What are my thoughts? Well, I'm really pleased to see the broad reach that you have and the vision that you have within the concept of pilotage and the focus on safety, the recent work that you've been doing on pilot boarding, looking for innovation, and starting to gather the ideas from a very diverse group. And diversity and inclusion really does support and is the crux of how you're going to get innovative thought and starting to look to the future. The maritime industry is constantly changing. I said that, I think, on the last edition, you know, the only constant is change. And we have this changing environment, which means that we cannot come at questions at these problems with the same thought process that led us to these problems. So we need to reach out and to get these diverse opinions and ideas. And one of the things I think IAMPA has been doing is looking broadly at all aspects of diversity and inclusion. And I applaud you for that, and please continue to do that even more so, because it is so critical to what we do. It has to become the norm that diversity and inclusion is the baseline from which we work. When we're looking to the future of this overall concept of the maritime industry, there's so much happening around technology, around autonomy, around machine learning. We are getting smarter and smarter, but are we really? I think the only way we can actually, we talk about smart ports and smart navigation. The way forward is really to focus on this concept of ensuring that we have a good mixture of a regulatory structure, a legal legislative structure, the technology, but then also the concepts of the people, the societal expectations, the people who are involved. Because it's only when all three of those merge together effectively that we're going to end up with actual trusted systems as we move forward into the new future, the new vision of what the maritime industry will be.
Thank you, Jillian, for your blessings for AIMPA. And also, last but not the least, few words for Nautical Institute to encourage fellow mariners to be a part of Nautical Institute, take membership. Anything would you like to add?
Certainly, of course. If you aren't in the NI, I think you should be in the NI, and that is our hashtag INTHENI. So in the NI, I love that one. But since we're talking about vessel traffic services, specifically from a VTS point of view, VTS is a profession in its own right. And as such, the Nautical Institute made a conscious effort to recognize VTS personnel who are trained to the V103 standard as full members of the Nautical Institute. So if you came into VTS from high school, if you came into VTS from another industry, and also if you are not yet in the NI and you came into VTS from the maritime industry, please become a member of the Nautical Institute, because we are there for professional aspects, and the development of the professional VTS operator is just as critical as the professional as all maritime professionals. The Nautical Institute, of course, has that seat at the IMO. We're active in the International Association of Marine Aids to Navigation and Lighthouse Authorities, and we are very supportive of new and innovative ideas on how we can ensure safety of navigation and keep our focus on the maritime professional.
Thank you so much, Jillian, for coming on this show. And the floor is yours, Captain Gajanan.
Thank you very much. It was a very elaborate answer, and thank you very much for the recommendation you have given to the AIMPA, the respect that you have for us, our work is really heart-touching for us. And definitely, technology, automation, and including the people in that system is also very important. And AIMPA is inching towards that, integrating the people. This is the first association of pilots in India. And we're also roping in and connecting a lot of pilots in Australia, New Zealand, Europe. So there is a kind of knowledge sharing happening from people like you. So yes, AIMPA will definitely live up to your expectations and take these things forward. I'm very thankful for having you on this show, and it will really a moment of pride for us to have a person like you who has dedicated so much to VTMS training and also to the leadership of Nautical Institute, and least to say your involvement and support, on the AIMPA. Thank you so much, Jillian. Thanks.
Thank you, Captain Gajanan. Thank you, Jillian. Thank you so much.